Hello everyone, welcome back to the kitchen table. Today on the kitchen table, it's just a quick video which has kind of been prompted by a couple of discussions I've had and a couple of observations, and it's about kind of pre-flight checks. The fact that, from anecdotal evidence of my eyes anyway, it appears that quite a lot of people aren't kind of doing some basic checks that I think everyone should be doing before they fly their drone, and a few that I think you ought to do after you've finished. But before we go any further, it's the kitchen table. We tend to have a beverage when we're discussing drones. We've had a run of caffeinated beverages being served in the delightful on the kitchen table mug, but I couldn't resist a little half a glass of this fantastic Silenus Coonawarra Cabernet Sauvignon 2011 Reserve from Australia, which is absolutely full of fruity fantasticness. So cheers. Oh, that is good. Okay, so look, I don't want to patronise anyone or teach anyone to suck eggs and all that kind of thing, but it just seemed recently in some conversations, I remember having a chat with somebody about saying, I always run through a few basic pre-flight checks, and I got a very funny look, and the guy said, dude, it's not a 747. And that kind of slightly annoyed me, because no, it's not a 747. But it's not a toy either, and it's perfectly capable of doing some serious damage to people or property. And I think anybody who's throwing one of these in the air really ought to be doing, at an absolute minimum, a few basic checks. So I never think it's a bad thing to refresh those. And it doesn't have to take a long time. It's just, a matter of a few seconds just to check obvious things. So the first thing I tend to check is a quick look round. I pull it out the flight case, I have a quick look. If you've got a P3, you might want to just check on the cracking situation if you have any. You're looking for anything that might have happened while it was in the case or wherever you stored it, any cracks or anything obvious, and that should be fine. The next thing to do is check the security of your gimbal or anything else you've got attached to the aircraft. In my case, I'm using the stock gimbal. We've got the anti-drop clips on both sides, they're all good, and check the quality of your dampers. These can sometimes stretch, crack and break as they get older, and as well as being a risk for drop, it actually also puts a vibration into your video. So you don't want to be running with scrappy old dampers. Use some of the fresh ones. If you've got anything attached to the outside like I have here, this is the Flytrex Live 3G in its cradle. Just double check everything is secure. This one's held in with 2 good screws, and nothing's loose. The next thing I like to do is just check by spinning the motors, just by hand, just like that, because that is going to pick up 90% of any motor related issues, because you'll feel or hear a graunchiness. If there's any grit or debris or other rubbish that's got in there, you'll hear it and you'll feel it. I had somebody not so long ago, because the magnets in here, had this on a desk, and somehow a small staple had got in there while they were doing things on their desk with it. It got inside, and they didn't notice until they actually came to try and take off, and 3 props fired and 1 didn't, because the staple was jamming between the magnets and the bell housing and stopping it. Simple thing like that would have stopped that. Hello, this is new me, that was old me, and he forgot to say something. One of the things that I do as part of regular maintenance, so I don't do it personally as pre-flight, but I do it kind of every couple of weeks, is just pull the motor shaft and see if you can wiggle it up and down, or have some movement side to side. If you can, there's a sign that the bearings might be on their way out. You can see a couple of them in the middle here, and you can replace those bearings or buy new motors, but if you've got too much play in those motor shafts, it's probably not a good idea to send the aircraft up. If you don't do regular maintenance, ideal time is when you've spun the props down. Just give them a tug and see if there's any play. Anyway, back to old me. The other thing that I always check is the state of the props. It's fairly obvious by running a finger down if you've got any big nicks or dings. If it's just a slight imperfection, then that's okay. You're looking for big chunks, anything that might affect the aerodynamic performance. One thing though that I do that I don't know how many of you do is, there is, just because of the nature of the way things are, there is going to be a weakness here where the blade meets the hub, and so I always like to just put a couple of thumbs, where are we going? Put a couple of thumbs in there and just give it'll show any stress cracks. And, you know, it's a bit like tyres on a car. These are the only things that are stopping it from turning into a big brick. So it's always worth checking these out. And if in doubt, put a fresh set on. Don't go, oh, well, this one's a bit knackered. As I say, at best, it will introduce some extra vibrations. And at worst, if it vibrates enough, it could cause something more disastrous to happen. And then that's it for pre-flight. I mean, it's taken me much longer to talk about it than it would do to do it. And it's just those simple things can save you a lot of grief. The next thing I always do is once it's in the air, hover it for the first flight of the day, hover it 10 feet up, 10 feet away from you and watch it. And if it sits there nicely and it acts right and it looks right, then it probably is right. Whether or not you do your compass cals and everything else, that's kind of irrelevant. The only other thing I would suggest to people, which has saved me a load of times for doing things like this, is when you've come for your last flight of the day, before you put it in the case and just lock everything away, do a quick post-flight check. Just check that, you know, again, you've not picked up any crap in the motors, that the props that you're going to use are all good, that everything here is secure. Because if you do it at the end of today, it means you can go home and fix the problem, knowing that the fact that next time you go to fly, you'll be ready to go. You know, I learnt this the hard way in the early days when I didn't notice at the end of one flight that I must have sort of, one of the dampers had just aged to the point where it cracked, didn't notice, and went to the field the next time to fly, saw it in the pre-flight, didn't have any spares with me. Waste of time. So do a post-flight check as well, and it should be better. There we go. I said it was going to be brief. It's not rocket science, you know. And I'm sorry for those of you who are watching it who do all that, and you think, well, what are you talking about, you idiot? But you know, I don't think it's ever a bad thing just to refresh. And the numbers of people I've seen lately who are potentially new to the hobby, who take the thing out the case, put it on the ground, fire it up, and take off. Just have a little pause and just check out some of the things that could go wrong. This could hurt people, and also it's your investment. If you'd be a bit gutted if it fell to the ground and smashed into a million pieces because of something that you could have picked up with a simple check before you flew. There we go. Thanks as ever for all your time, and I'm going to see you again soon on the kitchen table. But until then, cheers.